Hey guys, I'm doing a guide on how to import, create, set up, and even build your own WeakAuras. This is the first part of it that goes over how to import WeakAuras that other users have made and customize them to whatever works best for yourself. The target audience for this particular video is players that have the WeakAuras add-on but don't really want to create their own. Like you may find the interface a bit overwhelming, or you just don't want to delve into it that much. You just want to use the work that other people have done to work for you. If I was a player that didn't know how to build my own WeakAuras, I would start by either importing them from a website or by importing them through chat. So, common website that's used for sharing and importing WeakAuras is wago.io. It's commonly used to share many WeakAura packages that are used today. So if I was looking for a WeakAura that, for example, showed my Blessing of Freedom duration, I would find it on Wago by searching for it, and I would copy the WeakAura string by clicking here. This puts it on my clipboard, so I can go to the WeakAura menu by doing /WA. I would go to the top where it says New, and go down to Import. This is where I paste my import string. Just Control V. Then you'll get a window somewhere on your screen that says what the WeakAura is before you're about to import it. Just click Import. And this is the WeakAura that I just copied from online. It's also possible to import WeakAuras from chat. So for example, if I were to whisper it, I can just click it in chat and import. Now, this WeakAura is pretty bare. All it does is when I use Blessing of Freedom, it pops up with an icon on my screen for the duration of it. It's not terribly useful to me. And it'll be common that you import WeakAuras that are not quite to your liking. So there are a few things you'll want to check when customizing your WeakAuras. So first of all, it might not always show up under this loading condition. Sometimes you'll have to search for it by using the search bar up here. If you are customizing your own WeakAuras, there are 3 tabs that will be relevant to you: the display, the load, and maybe the actions. The first thing you should always do when importing a WeakAura that someone else has made is check the load conditions. For example, right now this one has nothing configured in the load. What this means is this WeakAura is always loaded. It's always checking to see if I have Blessing of Freedom on my character. Now, the reason this is bad is you might have thousands of WeakAuras in your library, and you don't want your game to be constantly checking if any of them should show up. You only want them to be displaying if it's relevant to the situation you're in. That's what the load condition is for. So for example, Blessing of Freedom is only relevant when I'm playing my Paladin, so I would check player class, go to Paladin. If the WeakAura is specific to talent as well, you can also specify for which of the 3 talent specializations you want. You can also be specific to talent selected. Another very commonly used setting for load is in combat, so you only load the WeakAura in combat. And another commonly used one is encounter ID. So this one is specific to which raid boss you're fighting. You have to put in a number here. You know which number to put in by mousing over the field. For example, if I only wanted to load this on Agumar, I would just look at this list and see that his number is 2063, and I would type that in. For right now, let's say I only wanted to use this WeakAura in combat on my Paladin. I would click these, and now when I use Blessing of Freedom, it does not show up because I'm not in combat. For example, if I were to hit this training dummy to get in combat, now I'm in combat, and if I use Blessing of Freedom, it shows up. Again, this load condition is important because you don't want the WeakAuras add-on to be checking for every single WeakAura you have in your library. You only want it to be checking for the ones that are relevant in the situation you're in. Otherwise, it's going to check for every condition at every frame, which right now would be 70 times per second. It can get quite overwhelming if it's doing it for all the WeakAuras you have in your library. The next part is the display tab. Uh, this is mostly oriented towards customizing how you want it to appear on your screen to best maximize your awareness of it and to best improve your gameplay. Right now it's just in the middle of my screen, it's just an icon, doesn't say anything, it covers my character, not terribly useful. So I can either, while I have it selected in the menu, drag and drop it around, which works fine for the most part. I can also be more specific about where I want it to go, so I can use the X and the Y offsets to specify coordinates. I can also change the size of the icon, so I can either drag and drop this, or if I want it to be perfect squares, I can type in the numbers here. But still, even though this icon is the size and the position that I like, it's still not terribly useful. Right now, we have automatic icon checked. This is because it's checking for Blessing of Freedom. The automatic icon is a smart setting that knows which icon to pull in for Blessing of Freedom. However, you are able to change the picture if you want to something else. But I'm not going to do that right now. If I wanted to display the cooldown, or sorry, not the cooldown, the progress of the Blessing of Freedom aura to see how long the duration was on me, I could check the cooldown window. When your weak aura is based off of the aura that's on you, cooldown means the duration of the buff or debuff in whatever the case is. So as the duration of the buff decreases, the icon becomes progressively grayed out. You can also inverse it, so it becomes progressively not grayed out if you want to. There are other options such as desaturate if you want it to be uh, less standing out to yourself while it's on your screen, but you still want it to be there. You can also use glow to make it pop out and have this nice golden border around it. Glow is particularly useful for WeakAuras that should always be catching your attention. The text settings on WeakAuras tend to be quite useful. It by default allows you to specify 2 text strings. So if I enable the first one, this field for text is where you enter what text you want to see. Right now it says %s, which if you mouse over it, you can see what these little special codes can translate to. Special %s is stacks. Other common ones are %p for progress. You'll also sometimes see %n for name. And %c is how you do a custom Lua script, which you don't need to know about for now. So right now, if I use %s, that's stacks. Stacks of Blessing of Freedom, which Blessing of Freedom doesn't stack. It'll always be 1, so it's not very useful. Oop. So if I use Blessing of Freedom, the icon pops up, but there's no text for stacks because Blessing of Freedom doesn't have stacks. It's just a single buff. A more useful text string might be the progress, the amount of time remaining on this buff, if I want to know the exact amount of seconds, rather than just looking at the time it takes to spin around. So I would change that to %p based off of the special codes that I have here. And you can see the preview here in the bottom right is a little amount of time duration as an example text. So you can change the text in this window here. You can make it larger. I can change the color if I wanted to. Font, position, put it right in the center. Also inside or outside. So for example, outside top would be above the icon, whereas inside top would be right inside the border. There's also the remaining time precision. For example, if I don't like this decimal here, it's not very useful to me, I can just reduce the precision. Now when I use Blessing of Freedom, I have a duration of the amount of seconds I have left on Blessing of Freedom. You can use two text strings, so for example, I can enter another one. If I want it to be just whatever I want, I can just type it in here. And let's have that go on the bottom outside. So with actions, the settings up at the top, sorry. With the display settings, we have the options at the top, the text settings, width and height, X and Y position. Those are the basics of recustomizing the display of your WeakAuras. Another useful tab that is kind of related to display is the actions. So some functionality in this tab is a little bit advanced, but some of the basics that I really like are chat message. You could have it do a /say when the WeakAuras shows up. You can have it type whatever you want here. It'll just do a message from your character whenever it loads, or sorry, whenever it triggers. You can have it play a sound. During your raid encounter, your visual input can be quite cluttered sometimes. It's easy to get overwhelmed and not notice all of the visual cues that are going on, which is why I personally like to use sound inputs. Unfortunately, most of these default sounds are pretty bad, but some of the stronger ones for WeakAuras, and even though I hate this one, air horn is quite good. We also have ones like sonar and sword ring. I also like Jedi. Well, there's tons to mess with. You can also make your own custom ones if you know how to do that.
Aggro.
So that's worth looking into if you're a person that responds more quickly to audio cues. And personally, I am, so all of my important WeakAuras and raids have sound effects associated with them. There are a few more little pieces of functionality that I forgot to mention in the intro, but I'll go over them anyway. The first is this little eyeball right here on the right side of the menu, which controls the visibility of the WeakAuras while you're in the WeakAura menu. So this is mostly useful for previewing how your UI will look when multiple of these WeakAuras are loaded. So for example, if I wanted to, let's see, let's look at how it would look next to my Holy Paladin abilities. So I would go to my Holy Paladin group, and right now this is the entire group of Holy Paladin WeakAuras I have. I can just click this eye to enable the visibility of all of them right now. And then on Blessing of Freedom, I can click the eye and I can use this to, if I wanted to, line them up with these other abilities. So when I'm in combat, I can see all of these together. The next one is the group functionality. So if you don't want these WeakAuras floating off on their own, you can create groups for them. So that's in the new section. You can create a new group if you don't have one. And then you can put standalone WeakAuras into the group either by clicking the arrow here and clicking your group. The other way to do that is to just drag and drop. And the last piece of functionality is the animations tab, which is also kind of like the display. And I haven't experimented with these a lot myself, but they're pretty easy to play around with. The main one you'd probably use is the main section where you can choose these presets. You can have it bounce. Let's see, flash kind of makes it flicker like that. Flip is this kind of annoying thing. You see pulse on a lot of things. It's not very noticeable, but it kind of makes the icon look a little bit alive. It's good for like temporary icons. Shake is, kind of obnoxious. Spin and spiral. This one's really ridiculous. I mean, the point of all of these is just to catch your attention because in a raid encounter, there's a lot going on. You need the most important bits of information to be aware to you immediately. It's the whole point of using these animations and sounds. So let's see what happens if I start it with bounce and then have it turn into a spiral. Yeah, so you can play around with that. I believe that is it for going over customization of display and load and actions at a basic level. The load is definitely worth messing around with. There's lots of options. You can make it so it's only on a particular character you're on. You can make it so it only happens on a certain difficulty, like Mythic. It's worth experimenting with, and experiment with the display settings as well. That's it. I'll do another video on how to create basic triggers with WeakAuras.